Well, I think one of the things we need to look at is a TIF for that area. Secondly, I think we need to have a change in the legal department. I believe that the legal department should be putting pressure on those owners of the property that are vacant, live in New York City. What can we do to make it hard on them to just stay there and let that property, diminish? And then after that, we're going to have to actively go out and recruit new business. Now, hopefully, the Shields will be the economic boom and engine that helps develop that whole area. But I would look at a TIF, and I would look at stronger legal to put pressure on the existing owners of the dilapidated properties.
Are they doing something wrong right now that was actionable? I mean, it's just a non-used building.
Well, it's a non-used building that we've got our citizens cleaning up. Our citizens are
cleaning. It's a campaign.
No, well, maybe the guy that started the campaign. But I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, you can't let them just have a dilapidated building, weeds growing up all over the place, so.
Well, I would implement, however affordable, and within the jurisdiction of city, because MacArthur touches multiple jurisdictions, Jerome, Leon Grove, some unincorporated areas, but the recommendations put forth by the Lakota group as they submit their final master plan for MacArthur Boulevard. And let me say that the current study of Lakota for MacArthur Boulevard, the Mansur study for Enos Park, our current commercial study for the PGAV for East Springfield, all those studies provide an amazing amount of information and amazing templates for us going forward. And another example of why Springfield's so well positioned to take advantage of the information we're gathering, including the marketplace study that's underway and the competitive analysis, although I have to say, having reviewed the competitive analysis, there weren't a lot of shocking surprises in there for me, considering they came up with the 4 same targeted industry groups that we had identified 5 years ago. But that said, I think we are well positioned in so many areas, and MacArthur Boulevard certainly is a troublesome corridor, but not the most troublesome corridor in the city. I say there's others that might even be more troubled and more blighted that need attention. 9th Street, South Grand Avenue, for example. And I think we can have the template, we can have the data, the baseline information, and we need to go ahead and use the recommendations that are in there and apply those wherever possible. So that would be the first thing I would do. The Lakota group will have 3 recommendations. They're called min, mid, and max. And the minimum improvements are ones that can be done very affordably. The mid-level are ones that may cost a little bit more, but they include things like curb cuts and parking alignments and so on. I encourage you all to read the master plan. Fascinating study, and it's the type of thing that we need as a template for redevelopment, and including residential, other components that match up with the extension of MacArthur Boulevard. But in addition, specifically talking about Kmart and Esquire, prior to the recession, we had some exciting projects on the drawing board for those properties. As a matter of fact, we had a tenant for the Kmart building. We had a tenant. And right after finance, insurance, and real estate in this most recent recession, retail took the biggest hit. And I could send you an email of about 500 nationwide retailers that went out of business. We're all familiar with Circuit City, but the one that was going to go into the Kmart building went bankrupt as well. So that deal dissolved right before our very eyes, only months before. I'm sorry?
What was that? What store was that?
It was Steve & Barry's, which is...
That's my favorite store.
So we had that deal pretty well structured. It's unfortunate. The Esquire, we had the shops at Cherry Grove, which still, there's a lot of moving parts in these. And one of the things that is sometimes difficult, and Mike Houston knows this because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions and negotiations that go on in these various projects. And oftentimes, there's circumstances beyond anyone's control while the project doesn't move forward, whether it's a parcel of property that someone doesn't want to let go of, or it's embedded in a trust, or any number of things. So many times we could have marketed so many properties in the central area and other troubled neighborhoods, but there's a circumstance that prevents it. A lot of people would like to take that Kmart property, but the owner of the bowling alley doesn't want to sell it. They want both of those. So those are circumstances that, whether you don't like the legal department or whatever, you can't control. And so those are the types of things that people aren't aware of that sometimes impede the types of development that we all seek.
In terms of the Kmart building, one of the things you have to understand is what the basic problem with the Kmart building is, and that is that the company, when Kmart went belly up, certain companies bought Kmart locations. The organization that's in New York City bought a bunch of these locations. This is the only one that they have left. the initial price that they wanted on that property was at like $5.3 million, which is a totally ridiculous price. The building itself is falling apart, and I really don't think that you can think in terms of a reuse of that building. The best thing that would happen would be to take the building down and try to develop it from scratch. But given the price in terms of what they're asking for it, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. When you have large properties like that, probably code enforcement, or keep in mind we have fees right now for vacant buildings that are boarded up and closed up that are assessed on a regular basis, that if you have it, you have to register, you pay a fee, you have to pay a regular fee after that. If we would design that structure rather than making it a flat $1,000 and base it on size, you might be able to encourage people to do something with large properties as opposed to just letting them sit there because they no longer are affordable. Code enforcement is one of the ways that you do that. Now, you want to be business friendly, but if you have someone that is causing problems and blight, you also want to encourage them to do something. Town and Country Bank's headquarters is at the corner of Ash and MacArthur. That has always been the headquarters of the bank, so that's where I was. Yeah, still have an office there. I actually formed the MacArthur Boulevard Business Association, and I did it for two reasons. One was the fact that you had Shields coming with the MacArthur extension, and number two, we had a city election coming up, and I wanted the city to begin to focus on MacArthur, and the best way to do that was to get people looking and thinking about it, because before the association, no one was talking about MacArthur. Yes, we have the study from Lakota Group, but what you have to be able to do is to make something happen there. And whether that is in the form of streetscape or taking one specific piece of property along MacArthur and actually having some type of development, you need to do something that's going to create the attitude within the community that something is happening. And no matter what that is, that's the most important thing, is to make something happen along there so that people will visually see that. It's probably not going to be the Kmart building because nobody's going to be able to pay the price that this company wants for that particular property. But you can find a piece of property, and probably one of the best that you could start with might be down by South Grand and MacArthur in terms of trying to do a development there. But probably the easiest thing to do, and where you might be able to do this through state or federal funding, is to think in terms of a streetscape. And again, create the attitude that something is happening. And that's the most important thing that needs to be done.
One of the things I've been focusing on the most with economic development is, as you know, I've focused on at the healthcare industry in the medical district, but I've also talked a lot about MacArthur Boulevard and Enos Park and the East Springfield plan that's on the books. And I think one of the things that we miss sometimes in our economic development strategies is that we have to have a community development strategy that goes along with it. We can build nice infrastructure, and we can put attractive street lights up, and we can make nice building facades, and that helps, and that looks good, and I think that helps to attract business. But as we've seen downtown, it hasn't really attracted the kind of business that we thought would be attracted. And people and businesses, I believe, come to a community and stay in a community. I mean, a business will come and they look at the bottom line and they look at all those business indicators. There's no doubt about that. But they also look at the community, and they look about where their families are going to go to school, and what kind of amenities there are in the community, and what kind of cultural activities there are in the community. And so I think that we as a community have to look at this stuff as a big picture, and we have to bring all those players to the table And we have to all come together and try to understand each other's issues and each other's perspectives and positions, instead of it all being sort of, it seems like we are always, you know, and I've felt it in this race. The part of the difficulty is you go talk to all these various groups, and everyone has, you know, their own specific interest, of course. But what we really need to be doing is bringing these groups together and finding common interests, so that we can, you know, the things that we that we can simply not agree on and it just isn't going to work for various reasons, you know, maybe we take that off the table. But let's look at the things that we as a community can agree on, bring people together around those things, and roll up our sleeves and get to work. I mean, I don't know that there's a, you know, specific, sure, we can talk about, you know, expanding the TIF. I don't know, to be honest with you, if that qualifies under the blight conditions. I don't know if, you know, TIFs have been pretty successful, I think. You know, certain TIFs have been successful. It hasn't been successful on the east side. I mean, we've got TIFs, we've got enterprise zones out there, you know, in there, and that hasn't drawn the business development that we want. And well, yeah, a lot of people argued that shouldn't have qualified for a TIF to begin with. I mean, you know, so I think you have to look at what the qualifications of a TIF are, and you know, whether or not you can even extend those TIFs to other areas. But you know, it can work. It's been a successful strategy. I'm not saying I'm not opposed to TIFs. I've actually come full circle on TIFs since I pretty much, you know, started with the school district. You know, the TIFs were always the enemy of the school district, and I kind of bought into that for a long time. But when I started working more with the city, I mean, you have to bring some sort of financial incentives to these developers, whether we like it or not. Their bottom line is the bottom line. And we have to do something to bring business back. And the other thing I've talked a lot about is I believe we need to redirect our development efforts and our priorities back into the inner core of the city. We're all around the outer edges, and we continue to be pushing out, and that's at the expense of the city, of our city, and we're going to continue to see deterioration if we continue to do that. So I think we have to redirect in.
Well, I was reading an article a couple of days ago about some success stories for downtown revitalization, and I think some of the points from that article are relevant to a site like MacArthur. They talk about, one of the points is you need to get it out of your head that the retail mix of the past is still in play here. Your big boxes like your Walmart, your Sears, that kind of thing, are generally going to go out to, in our case, the west side of town. So you've got to start finding alternative uses. You have to reimagine the area, if you will. And I know some of that, the MacArthur Business Boulevard Association, or whatever their name is, has gotten some consultants to do that very thing. And I know I've seen some of the plans. And they are doing a good job of reimagining what the area could look like. And that's great. And all the plans in the world are fantastic. But if you don't have the funding or don't provide the incentives to make it happen, it's not going to happen. How long has the Kmart building been sitting there vacant? What, 8 years now? Something like that? 7 or 8 years? Clearly, something needs to happen to give that a boost. And that was another point of this article, was you need to provide incentives. Because the retailers with the money and everything, they're going to go out and they're going to buy, and they're going to go where they know they can make money. But downtown, or in that case, MacArthur or Enos Park, you have to provide something, incentivize them coming into that area. In that particular case, the Kmart building, okay, it's not going to be retail. What could it be? Well, right down the way, there used to be an old, well, was it Nationals that it used to be? And then it was Schnucks, I think, after that. Now it's an office building. Similar thing could happen there, and I know that there have been efforts to turn that into an office building. And I know that because I know that they've tried to get the state to move in there. And they bid for some to move in there. And I can say that because it's public. You can FOIA that information. The fact is, the reason we haven't done it is because of the cost of renovating it. If you could institute a TIF district or some other sort of incentive, and a TIF probably makes the most sense if it could pass the blight test. It certainly would probably pass the but-for test. But if you can do that, and provide some of those funds to do that. And then next thing you know, you've got an office building in there. You've got 2 big office buildings right there. And you've got all those little businesses around it. And the next thing you need to do is you need to spruce it up. And that was another point of this article, is you need to spend money on sprucing up the area.
What was this article in?
I read it on the internet. I Googled it. You know, I was just looking at night when I get home after walking, I just Google things.
How to fix a town?
I believe this particular search term was downtown revitalization. And then I just read articles that interest me. And this was one, like I said, it was just a couple of days ago. And it was 5 points. And so those are some of the points. But again, I think they're very applicable to the MacArthur Boulevard. We have something that hasn't been moving for a good number of years, so I would think it would qualify. We have to provide incentives. It's clearly not going to happen on its own. And if we don't do something now or in the near future, it's going to continue to deteriorate to the point that it gets worse and worse and worse. We need to step in now, and we need to do something about it. So we need to make that stretch of road better, which the consultants agreed with. They said the same thing, and they came up with some ideas. But we need to provide some incentives somehow to kickstart some growth there and make Kmart and the bowling lanes, just like that other office, an anchor to bring in more roofs, more people, more businesses. And hopefully, once Legacy Point gets going and Shields is up and going and that increases traffic along there, that will be provide an incentive on its own for more businesses to locate in the area.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what doomed MacArthur was Shields. When you give a developer money to put in by an extra tax, they get charged 1% more tax at Shields, that you've doomed the old part of MacArthur, because the problem with Springfield, the 12 years I've been in it, it's easier to build in a green spot than it is to come back inside the city limits. And the first thing we need to do out north, most of that was developed before the TIF district ever took over. I mean, there again, the one by me, the TIF by me, was strictly a political thing that Ozzie did for the guy that owned TKI. It was never going to work because most of the land was houses. And our houses went down in value each year, so the TIF went down in value. You can't keep letting the city of Springfield expand into green areas where it's cheaper to build, plus you give these people an enterprise zone, a tax break, and then expect the inside of Springfield to get rebuilt, because it's just not going to happen, especially in this recession.
Well, I do agree with what he just said about, you know, the run out too far out of the city loop, it seems like. And I think that kind of falls into the school district and the preference of my kids should go to Chatham because we're to the furthest point out of the city limits that where he could, you know, be in that little area, or, you know, or my kid goes to Pleasant Plains, you know, and that's what I'll say about that. But getting back to MacArthur, I kind of came into that neighborhood over there. They called it the old strip, if you remember, when all the kids were active in the community, and you had the steak and shakes, and you had the little cruise about, whatever it was. And really back then, you had more of a small town, basically. And so, as Frank says, the developers come out and start pumping it out to the furthest limits, and that's, you know, I call that the Great White Flight anyways, because isn't that what it is? Everybody wanted to go out to the further extremes. And this happened in Chicago, it happened in St. Louis, the inner city decays, it falls in, and then it just sits there and doesn't do much. And but really, for a population of 120,000 guesstimated people that live in a community like this, you would think they'd take more interest in the inner city. And since I've been on South Grand and Spring, the Vinegar Hill Neighborhood Association has always looked at MacArthur as a dilemma. And there was a certain instance with the mobile station at MacArthur and Ash, and they were just banging the drum. They needed the booze. They wanted the liquor. They had to have their liquor, you know. So we kind of opposed it, but they got their liquor permit, and, you know, life goes on. But they had to have the liquor there to make a profit, because you can't just make it off of gasoline when you have a gas station, you know. And so that went through. But I was like, you know, now another outlet for booze, you know what I mean? So that you'll have people further out from the east that walk and become pedestrians, and then you'll have trash and, you know, empty bottles of booze, and I pick it up all the time around my neighborhood anyways. But then you're right by the church there, the Catholic Church, and that's inner city problems. But the way I would address the MacArthur dilemma is I do agree with what the association is trying to do with the scape, the cityscape. If we can just go in there and maybe put some nice landscaping that's not going to cost the city an arm and a leg, and get a facade going with some cityscaping, make that not so harsh on the eyes, and make it more friendly where pedestrians may want to walk their dogs and their kids throughout the boulevard there, and tie into the communities that exist in the outer park area and the Leland Grove area, because those people are middle income range, and they do preserve their homes, and the area around there is really not that bad. It does have a good middle class base. So if we can start drawing them back into the center of the core of the city, and I do know this for one thing, we really do need to look at a grocery store over there, because when I was the president of the Neighborhood Association, Vinegar Hill, that's what everybody wanted in the community. I don't know what the stipulations was when Schnucks came in, if they made a deal with the city. Frank might know this better than I, but they might have said, well, look, no more grocery stores within a certain perimeter of ours. I don't know if that actually went down that way or not, but it seems like that might be the hindrance in that area. But it does need a good grocery store, and a grocery store could be a good start for an anchor there, in my commonsensical opinion. And as a neighborhood past president, the community would always inject that to me, and we'd always talk that. And also developing maybe a movie theater again, to have an interest for the community to participate in that area. So kind of anchoring affordable small business there to generate more business.